Gleaner's little girl left a drawing for the sad boss. What the CEO did next shocked everyone. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Matthew Turner pressed his fingertips against his temples as the numbers on his computer screen blurred together. 11:37 at night, and the 47th floor of the Turner Associates building felt like a glass tomb suspended above Manhattan. The city sprawled below him in a carpet of lights, each one representing lives he could never touch, warmth he could never feel. He loosened his silk tie and rolled his shoulders, hearing the familiar crack of tension that had become his constant companion. 16-hour days had built his consulting empire, but they had also carved hollow spaces in his chest where other men kept their hearts. The leather chair creaked as he leaned back, studying his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, 40 years old, successful beyond most men's dreams, and utterly, completely alone. His assistant had gone home hours ago. The cleaning crew had finished their work, and silence pressed against him like a physical weight. Matthew stood and walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cool glass. Somewhere down there, families were tucked into warm beds, sharing stories and laughter. Somewhere down there, people belonged to each other. He had tried belonging once. Eleanor Westbrook, with her perfect pedigree and carefully arranged smile, had seemed like the logical choice for a wife. She understood his world, his ambitions, his need for control. But after 2 years of engagement, he had realized that understanding was not the same as caring, and logic was a poor substitute for love. That had been 3 years ago. Since then, he had thrown himself deeper into work, building walls higher and higher around the parts of himself that still hoped for something real. Matthew turned back to his desk, gathering the contracts that would wait until tomorrow, regardless of how late he stayed. As he reached for his briefcase, something white caught his eye. A piece of paper that had not been there when he left for his dinner meeting. He picked it up, frowning. It was a child's drawing, done in bold strokes of crayon. A stick-figure man in a black suit stood behind a large desk, but his circle head was turned down and blue teardrops fell from his dot eyes. Above the drawing, in careful block letters, someone had written, "For the sad boss." Matthew's breath caught in his throat. He sank into his chair, holding the paper with hands that trembled slightly. When had anyone last seen him clearly enough to know he was sad? When had anyone cared enough to try to comfort him? He studied the drawing more carefully. The stick figure wore a tie, just like his. The desk was rectangular and large, just like his. Even the windows were there, drawn as squares with lines through them. Someone had been watching him, seeing him, in a way that cut through all his carefully constructed facades. "Sir, I am sorry. I did not think anyone was still here." Matthew looked up to see a woman standing in his doorway, wearing the navy blue uniform of the cleaning service. She was probably in her mid-30s, with honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and green eyes that held both apology and determination. "I was just finishing up," he said, his voice rougher than usual. He cleared his throat and gestured to the drawing. "This was on my desk. Do you know anything about it?" The woman's cheeks flushed pink, and she glanced over her shoulder as if checking for escape routes. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Turner. My daughter, she came with me tonight because her babysitter got sick. And I thought she was just sitting quietly in the break room, but she must have wandered around while I was working. Your daughter drew this." "Yes, sir. Sophia. She is 7. The woman took a step into the office, wringing her hands. "I will make sure it never happens again. She knows she is not supposed to touch anything or go anywhere without permission." Matthew looked down at the drawing again. The sad boss, seen through the eyes of a 7-year-old who had somehow recognized his loneliness and wanted to reach out to him. His throat felt tight. "What is your name?" he asked. Whitney Bennett, sir. How long have you worked here, Whitney? 8 months, sir. Her voice was steady, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. She was preparing to be fired, he realized. Preparing to lose her job because her daughter had shown kindness to a stranger. And Sophia comes with you often. No, sir. Almost never. Tonight was an emergency, and I had no other choice. I know it is against policy. Matthew set the drawing carefully on his desk, smoothing out a corner that had gotten folded. What did you tell her about me? Whitney blinked, clearly not expecting the question. Tell her about you. She called me the sad boss. What did you say to make her think I was sad? A long pause stretched between them. Whitney shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her gaze dropping to the floor. I did not tell her anything specific about you, Mr. Turner, but Sophia, she notices things. She sees when people are hurting. And she thought I was hurting. Whitney looked up at him then, and something in her expression made his chest tighten. It was not pity exactly, but a kind of gentle understanding that he was not used to receiving. She asked me why the man in the big office always looked so lonely. Whitney said quietly. I told her that sometimes people who have important jobs work very hard and do not have much time for friends or family. She said that was sad, and she wanted to draw you a picture to make you feel better. Matthew stared at her, processing this information. A 7-year-old child had looked at him and seen not a powerful CEO, not a successful businessman, not even an intimidating boss. She had seen a lonely man who needed comfort. Where is she now? He asked. In the break room, probably asleep in one of the chairs. We will be finished soon and out of your way. I would like to meet her. Whitney's eyes widened. Sir, I would like to thank her for the drawing. That is very kind, Mr. Turner, but she is probably sleeping, and I should not keep you any longer. Matthew stood, and he saw Whitney instinctively take a small step backward. He was used to that reaction, the way people moved when he entered a room, the careful deference that kept him isolated. But tonight, for the first time in years, he wanted to bridge that distance instead of maintaining it. Please, he said, softening his voice. It would mean a great deal to me. Whitney studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether his request was genuine or some kind of test. Finally, she nodded. All right. But if she is sleeping, I do not want to wake her. Matthew followed Whitney through the corridors of his own building, seeing them from a different perspective. The halls that felt cold and impersonal during the day seemed even more stark at night, lit only by emergency lighting that cast long shadows on the walls. The break room was small and utilitarian, with a few round tables, a refrigerator, and a row of vending machines. In one corner, curled up in a plastic chair that was too big for her small frame, was the most beautiful child Matthew had ever seen. Sophia Bennett had her mother's blonde hair, but it fell in soft curls around her face instead of Whitney's practical ponytail. Her green eyes were closed, her lashes dark against pale cheeks, and she was wearing a simple pink dress with white sneakers that had seen better days. One small hand was tucked under her cheek, the other clutched a box of crayons. She insisted on bringing her art supplies, Whitney whispered. She never goes anywhere without them. Matthew approached slowly, not wanting to frighten the child if she woke. Up close, he could see that her clothes were clean and well cared for, but not expensive. Her sneakers had been repaired with white tape, and her dress, while pretty, had the look of something bought at a discount store. As he watched, Sophia's eyes fluttered open. She blinked a few times, focusing on his face, and then sat up straighter in her chair. "Mama!" she said, looking around until she spotted Whitney. "Right here, baby," Whitney said, moving to her daughter's side. "This is Mr. Turner. He wanted to thank you for the picture you drew." Sophia looked up at Matthew with curious, unafraid eyes. "Did you like it?" Matthew crouched down so he was at her eye level. "I loved it, Sophia. It was the most thoughtful gift anyone has given me in a very long time." She smiled then, a radiant expression that transformed her entire face. "Mama said you work really hard and do not have time for friends. That made me sad, so I wanted to make you something nice. Well, you succeeded. Your picture made me feel much better. Are you still sad, though?" The question caught him off guard. He glanced up at Whitney, who was watching the exchange with a mixture of pride and nervousness. "I think I'm a little less sad now," Matthew said honestly. Sophia nodded approvingly. "Good. Being sad all the time is not fun. Do you like to color?" "I have not colored in a very long time." "You should try it. It makes everything better." She held out her box of crayons. "Do you want to pick a color?" Matthew looked at the worn box of crayons, probably bought at the same discount store as Sophia's dress. The cardboard was soft from use, and several of the crayons were broken or worn down to stubs. But Sophia held it out to him as if she were offering him the most precious gift in the world. He reached out and selected a blue crayon, one that was still sharp and full-sized. "This one is nice. Blue is good for drawing the sky and water and happy things," Sophia said seriously. "Red is for angry pictures, and black is for scary ones. Yellow is for sunshine and flowers. What color do you use for drawing people?" "Depends on what kind of person they are. Nice people get bright colors. Mean people get dark colors." She tilted her head, studying his face. "I think you would be purple." "Purple?" "Purple is for people who are sad, but also kind. Like you." Matthew felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that spread outward from his heart to his fingertips. When had anyone ever called him kind? When had anyone looked at him and seen anything beyond his success or his intimidating reputation? "Thank you, Sophia," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said about me." "Really?" Her eyes widened. "But you are really important. I bet lots of people say nice things about you." Matthew considered this. People said he was brilliant, ruthless, successful. They called him a visionary, a force to be reckoned with, a man who got results. But kind. He could not remember the last time someone had used that word to describe him. "You would be surprised," he said. "Well, I think you are nice," Sophia declared, "and I think you need more friends." "Sophia," Whitney said quietly, a warning note in her voice. "Mr. Turner is very busy." But Matthew held up a hand. "It is all right." He looked back at Sophia. "You are absolutely right. I do need more friends." Sophia beamed at him. "I could be your friend if you want. I am good at being friends with people." The tightness in Matthew's chest intensified. He glanced up at Whitney, who was watching him with an expression he could not quite read, wariness, perhaps, mixed with something that might have been hope. "I would like that very much," Matthew said, "but it is very late, and you should probably get home to bed. Can I draw you another picture sometime?" "I would love that." Sophia slid down from her chair and walked over to him, holding out her small hand. "It was nice to meet you, Mr. Turner." Matthew shook her hand solemnly, marveling at how small and warm it felt in his. "It was nice to meet you too, Sophia. Thank you again for the picture." As Whitney gathered up Sophia's crayons and helped her put on a small jacket, Matthew found himself reluctant to let them leave. The break room, which had seemed cold and sterile when he entered, now felt warm and alive with their presence. "Whitney," he said as they headed toward the door. She turned back to him. "Yes, sir." "Would you—" He paused, unsure how to phrase what he wanted to ask. "Would you and Sophia like to have lunch with me tomorrow? Somewhere outside? Maybe in the park?" Whitney's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Sir?" I realize it is an unusual request, Matthew said quickly. But Sophia mentioned that I need more friends, and I thought perhaps we could start there. For several long seconds, Whitney said nothing. She looked down at Sophia, who was practically bouncing with excitement, and then back at Matthew. I do not think that would be appropriate, Mr. Turner, she said finally. You are my employer, and I am just... You are a mother who raised a daughter with enough compassion to comfort a stranger, Matthew interrupted. You are a woman who works hard to provide for her family. You are someone whose child sees the world with kindness and hope. He paused. I think lunch would be very appropriate. Whitney bit her lower lip, and Matthew could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Sophia tugged on her mother's hand. Please, Mama, I want to have lunch with Mr. Turner. It is not that simple, baby, Whitney said gently. Why not? Sophia asked. He seems nice, and he liked my picture. Matthew crouched down again, addressing Sophia directly. Your mama is being very smart, Sophia. She does not know me very well yet, so she wants to make sure I'm trustworthy before she agrees to spend time with me. Are you trustworthy? Sophia asked, with the directness that only children possess. Matthew met her gaze steadily. I am trying to be. Sophia nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. She turned to Whitney. He is trying to be trustworthy, Mama. Can we have lunch with him? Whitney closed her eyes briefly, and Matthew could see her weighing the decision. When she opened them again, her expression was cautious but not unkind. One lunch, she said finally, somewhere public. The park near here has a nice cafe, Matthew suggested. Tomorrow at noon. We will meet you there, Whitney said. But Mr. Turner, Matthew, please call me Matthew. Matthew, then. I want to be clear that this is just lunch, nothing more. Of course, Matthew said, though he could not quite suppress the smile that tugged at the corners of his mouth. Just lunch. As Whitney and Sophia left, Matthew found himself standing alone in the break room, still holding the blue crayon Sophia had let him keep. The building settled around him with its familiar nighttime sounds. But for the first time in years, the silence did not feel oppressive. He walked back to his office and sat down at his desk, placing Sophia's drawing carefully in the center where he could see it. The sad boss stared back at him with his blue teardrop eyes. But somehow the image did not seem as lonely as it had before. Matthew pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found James Morrison's number. His business partner and closest friend would probably think he had lost his mind, but James had been telling him for years that he needed to get a life outside of work. The phone rang 3 times before James's voice came through, groggy with sleep. Matt, do you know what time it is? James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to not make fun of me. A pause. Okay. Now I am awake. What is going on? How do you have lunch with a 7-year-old? What? I am having lunch tomorrow with a woman and her daughter, and I have no idea what I am doing. What do 7-year-olds eat? What do they talk about? What if she gets bored? Another pause, longer this time. Matt, are you feeling all right? Did you hit your head? I am fine. I met someone tonight. 2 someones, actually. And for the first time in, I do not know how long, I want to spend time with people who are not trying to get something from me. Well, I'll be damned, James said, and Matthew could hear the smile in his voice. Matthew Turner wants to have a normal human interaction. Mark your calendars, folks, because this might be the beginning of the end times. James, all right. 7-year-olds like simple food, sandwiches, fruit, maybe some cookies. They talk about everything and nothing, usually at the same time. And if she gets bored, ask her about her favorite things. Kids love to talk about their favorite things. That is it. That is it. And Matt, try to relax. You are overthinking this. I know. It is just, I do not want to mess this up. You won't, James said with surprising certainty. You might be emotionally constipated most of the time, but you are not a bad guy. Just be yourself. What if myself is not good enough? Then you will figure out how to be better. That is what you do. Remember, you see a problem and you solve it. After Matthew hung up, he sat in his office for another hour, staring at Sophia's drawing and thinking about the conversation. He had built his career on solving problems, on finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. But this felt different. This felt like the solution had found him. He thought about Sophia's earnest green eyes and the way she had offered him her crayons, as if she were sharing treasure. He thought about Whitney's careful protectiveness and the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. He thought about the warmth that had filled the break room when they were there, and the cold emptiness that had settled in after they left. For the first time in years, Matthew Turner was looking forward to tomorrow. Not because of a business deal or a successful negotiation, but because he was going to have lunch with a woman who saw through his facade and a little girl who thought he was kind. He carefully placed Sophia's drawing in his desk drawer, making sure it would not get wrinkled. Tomorrow, he would ask her to draw him another picture. Maybe this time, the sad boss would be smiling. Matthew gathered his things and headed for the elevator, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As the doors closed and the building began its descent, he caught his reflection in the polished steel. He still looked tired, still looked lonely, but there was something different in his eyes. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just the faint beginning of joy. 40 floors below, the city continued its restless motion, full of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to predict. But somewhere in Brooklyn, a little girl was probably dreaming about crayons and kindness, and her mother was wondering whether she had made the right choice by saying yes to lunch. And in a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, a man who had forgotten how to hope was lying awake, imagining what it might feel like to belong to someone again. Whitney Bennett stood in front of her small bathroom mirror, trying for the third time to tame her hair into something presentable. Her hands were shaking slightly, which annoyed her more than she cared to admit. It was just lunch, with her boss. And his daughter's drawing had apparently moved him enough to invite them to eat sandwiches in public. She pressed her palms against the sink and took a deep breath. This was probably a mistake. Rich men did not typically invite their cleaning staff to lunch unless they wanted something, and Whitney had learned the hard way to be suspicious of men who wanted things from her. "Mama, are you almost ready?" Sophia's voice drifted through the thin bathroom door. "I do not want to be late for lunch with Mr. Turner." "Almost, baby," Whitney called back, applying lip gloss with hands that were steadier now. She had chosen her best jeans and a simple blue sweater, nothing fancy but clean and appropriate. If Matthew Turner was expecting her to dress up like she belonged in his world, he was going to be disappointed. She opened the door to find Sophia waiting in the hallway, wearing her favorite yellow dress and clutching a small backpack. "What is in the bag, sweetheart?" "My coloring books and crayons, in case Mr. Turner wants to color with us," Sophia said matter-of-factly, "and I drew him another picture last night." Whitney's heart squeezed. Her daughter had such faith in people, such willingness to offer friendship without expecting anything in return. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Sophia, you need to remember that Mr. Turner is a very important man with lots of responsibilities. He might not have time to color or look at pictures during lunch." "But he liked my first picture," Sophia protested. "And he said he wanted to be my friend." "I know, baby, but sometimes adults say things they do not really mean, especially when they are trying to be polite." Sophia considered this with the seriousness that she brought to all important matters. "Do you think Mr. Turner was lying?" "Not lying exactly, but maybe he was just being nice." "I do not think so," Sophia said with conviction. "He had kind eyes." "I mean, people do not have kind eyes." Whitney wished she had her daughter's ability to read people so clearly. In her experience, kind eyes could hide cruel intentions, and handsome faces could mask ugly hearts. But she had promised Matthew Turner lunch, and she was not the kind of woman who broke her promises. The subway ride into Manhattan was filled with Sophia's chatter about what they might eat, and whether Mr. Turner liked animals, and if his office had any plants in it. Whitney tried to share her daughter's excitement, but anxiety gnawed at her stomach with each stop they passed. Rosa Martinez had been less than enthusiastic when Whitney told her about the lunch invitation. "Mija, be careful," the older woman had warned in her motherly way. "Rich men do not usually invite poor women to lunch unless they have an agenda." "Maybe he is just being nice," Whitney had suggested, though she had her own doubts. "Maybe," Rosa had agreed. "But watch yourself, and watch your daughter. Some men see kindness as weakness, and they use it against you." Whitney thought about Rosa's words as she and Sophia emerged from the subway station near Central Park. The cafe Matthew had suggested was visible across the street, its outdoor seating area filled with people enjoying the mild afternoon weather. "There he is," Sophia exclaimed, pointing to a tall figure sitting at a corner table. Matthew Turner looked different in daylight, Whitney realized. Still imposing, still expensive in his perfectly tailored clothes, but somehow more human. He was scanning the crowd with what looked like nervous energy, and when he spotted them, his face broke into a genuine smile. Whitney felt her heart do something traitorous in her chest. She had forgotten how attractive he was, how his presence seemed to command attention even when he was just sitting at a cafe table. But more than that, she had forgotten the gentleness she had glimpsed in him the night before when he spoke to Sophia. "Whitney, Sophia," Matthew said, standing as they approached. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting us," Whitney replied, noting that he had chosen a table slightly away from the main crowd, probably to give them privacy. Matthew pulled out chairs for both of them, and Whitney was surprised by the gesture. Most men she knew considered basic courtesy to be optional. "I was not sure what you might like to eat," Matthew said once they were seated, "but I spoke with the manager, and they have excellent sandwiches and salads, plus a good selection for children." "Can I have grilled cheese?" Sophia asked hopefully. "If that is what you would like," Matthew said. "What about you, Whitney? Turkey sandwich would be fine, thank you." Matthew signaled the server, and Whitney found herself studying his profile as he placed their order. There were lines around his eyes that suggested he spent more time frowning than smiling, and his hands moved with the precision of someone accustomed to control. But when he turned back to them, his expression was open, almost vulnerable. "I have to admit," he said, "I'm not very good at this." "At lunch?" Sophia asked, puzzled. Matthew laughed, and the sound was warm and unexpected. "At having lunch with friends. I usually eat at my desk while I work." "That sounds lonely," Sophia observed. "It is," Matthew agreed, "but I thought that was just how things had to be." "Why?" Sophia asked with characteristic directness. Matthew glanced at Whitney, who found herself curious about his answer. "I suppose I thought that if I stayed busy enough, I would not notice that I was lonely. Did it work?" "No," Matthew said simply. "It did not work at all." Their food arrived, and Whitney watched as Matthew interacted with Sophia throughout the meal. He listened to her stories about school and her drawings with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed completely charmed by her 7-year-old logic. "Mr. Turner," Sophia said around a bite of grilled cheese, "do you have any pets?" "No, I do not. My apartment building does not allow them." That is sad. Everyone should have a pet. They make you feel better when you are lonely. What kind of pet would you recommend? Sophia considered this seriously. A dog, I think. Dogs are loyal and friendly, and they love you no matter what. Cats are nice too, but they are more independent. You seem like you need something that would love you a lot. Whitney nearly choked on her sandwich. Sophia, that might be too personal. But Matthew was smiling. She is right. I think I would like something that would love me a lot. We do not have any pets either, Sophia continued. Our apartment does not allow them, and we could not afford the vet bills anyway. But someday, when I'm grown up, I am going to have a big dog and maybe some cats too. What kind of big dog? Matthew asked. A golden retriever, I think. They have soft fur and gentle eyes, like they understand when you are sad. Whitney felt her chest tighten. Sophia's innocent observations were painting a picture of their life that was both accurate and heartbreaking. Yes, they could not afford pets. Yes, their apartment had restrictions. Yes, her daughter understood sadness better than most children her age. Tell me about your drawings, Sophia, Matthew said, seeming to sense Whitney's discomfort. What do you like to draw most? Sophia's face lit up. Everything, but mostly people and animals and flowers. I drew you another picture last night. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This one is happier than the first one. Matthew unfolded the drawing carefully, and Whitney leaned over to see what her daughter had created. This time, the stick figure man was standing outside the big building, and he was holding hands with two other figures, a woman and a small girl. All three figures were smiling, and there were flowers and trees around them. It is beautiful, Sophia, Matthew said, his voice slightly rough. What gave you the idea to draw this? I thought about how you looked sad in your office, but then when you talked to us last night, you seemed less sad. So I drew a picture of you being happy outside with friends. Matthew stared at the drawing for a long time, and Whitney saw him swallow hard. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. This might be the most wonderful gift anyone has ever given me, he said. Sophia beamed. Really? Really? Whitney found herself blinking back tears of her own. There was something profoundly moving about watching this powerful man be so genuinely touched by her daughter's simple gesture of kindness. Sophia, Whitney said gently, why do not you color for a few minutes while Mr. Turner and I talk? Sophia nodded and pulled out her coloring book and crayons, settling into her chair with the contentment of a child pursuing her favorite activity. She is remarkable, Matthew said quietly. She is everything to me, Whitney replied. She is the reason I get up every morning, the reason I work so hard, the reason I keep going when things get difficult. It must be challenging, raising her alone. Whitney's defenses went up immediately. We managed just fine. I did not mean to imply otherwise, Matthew said quickly. I meant it must require tremendous strength and dedication. I admire that. You do not know anything about my life, Whitney said, though her tone was softer now. You are right, I do not. But I would like to, if you would be willing to tell me. Whitney studied his face, looking for signs of the condescension or pity she had learned to expect from people in his position. Instead, she saw only genuine curiosity and respect. Why? She asked. Matthew was quiet for a moment, watching Sophia color. Because in one evening, you and your daughter showed me more kindness than I have received in years. Because Sophia looked at me and saw someone worth caring about, even though I have spent most of my adult life being the kind of person who intimidates others. Because you raised a child who has enough empathy to comfort a stranger, and I want to understand how that happens. It happens by loving her unconditionally and teaching her that everyone deserves compassion, Whitney said simply. Even sad bosses in expensive suits. Whitney smiled despite herself, especially sad bosses in expensive suits. "Can I ask you something personal?" Whitney tensed. "What? What made you decide to trust me enough to come to lunch today?" The question surprised her. "I am not sure I do trust you," Whitney admitted, "but Sophia wanted to come, and she has good instincts about people. Plus, you seemed genuinely grateful for her drawing, not just politely dismissive." "I was grateful. I still am." Matthew paused. "Can I ask you something else? Depends on what it is. Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? Just the two of us?" Whitney's stomach dropped. There it was, the agenda Rosa had warned her about. "Mr. Turner." "Matthew," he corrected. "Matthew, I think there has been a misunderstanding. I am not looking for that kind of relationship with anyone, especially not with my employer." "What kind of relationship?" "You know what kind." Matthew frowned. "Actually, I do not think I do. I was asking if you would like to have dinner so we could get to know each other better. I was not making any assumptions about what that might lead to. Men like you do not ask women like me to dinner without expectations." "What do you mean, men like me and women like me?" Whitney felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You know exactly what I mean." "No, I do not," Matthew said firmly. "Please explain it to me." Whitney glanced around the cafe, acutely aware that they were having this conversation in public. "You are a wealthy, powerful man. I am a single mother who cleans offices for a living. We do not exactly move in the same circles. So men in your position typically see women in mine as temporary entertainment, available, disposable, and grateful for whatever attention they receive." Matthew's expression darkened. "Has someone treated you that way? It does not matter. It does matter. Has someone hurt you?" Whitney looked down at her hands, unwilling to meet his eyes. "Let us just say I have learned to be careful." "Whitney, look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her gaze to his. "I'm not asking you to dinner because I think you are available or disposable. I'm asking because I enjoy talking with you, because you challenge me in ways that no one else does, and because I would like to spend more time getting to know you without worrying about whether Sophia is getting bored or needs attention." "You barely know me. That is why I want to have dinner with you, to know you better." Whitney shook her head. "This is not a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you live in a different world than we do. Because when you get tired of playing with the novelty of having working-class friends, Sophia and I will be the ones who get hurt." Matthew was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful and controlled. "What would I have to do to prove to you that this is not a game to me?" "I do not know," Whitney said honestly. "Maybe nothing you could do would convince me. Then why did you come to lunch today?" Whitney looked over at Sophia, who was humming softly as she colored. "Because she believes in the goodness of people, and I did not want to disappoint her." "And what do you believe in?" "I believe in protecting my daughter and providing for her the best I can. Everything else is secondary." "That is not what I asked." Whitney met his gaze again. "I believe that most people will let you down if you give them the chance. I believe that hope is dangerous when you cannot afford to be wrong. And I believe that men who have everything they could want do not suddenly decide they need the friendship of women who have nothing, unless they want something specific in return." "What do you think I want from you?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Whitney was not ready to explore. "I do not know," she said finally. "That is what scares me." Sophia looked up from her coloring book. "Mama, are you okay? You sound sad." Whitney forced a smile. "I am fine, baby. Are you finished coloring?" "Almost. Mr. Turner, do you want to see what I made?" Matthew turned his attention to Sophia with obvious relief. I would love to. Sophia held up her coloring book, showing a page filled with flowers in bright, cheerful colors. I made a garden. Someday, I want to have a real garden with lots of flowers and maybe some vegetables too. It is beautiful, Matthew said. What kind of vegetables would you plant? Tomatoes and carrots and maybe some lettuce. Mama says fresh vegetables taste better than the ones from the store, but they cost more, so we usually buy the store ones. Whitney felt her face burn with embarrassment. Trust Sophia to innocently reveal details about their financial situation that Whitney would never share herself. Fresh vegetables do taste better, Matthew agreed without any trace of condescension. I have never tried growing them myself, but I imagine it would be very satisfying. You could try it, Sophia suggested. Even if you do not have a yard, you can grow herbs in pots on a windowsill. Mrs. Rodriguez in our building does that. That is a wonderful idea. Would you help me choose which herbs to grow if I decided to try it? Yes, Sophia said enthusiastically. Basil is good for cooking, and mint smells really nice. Whitney watched this exchange with a mixture of warmth and wariness. Matthew seemed genuinely interested in Sophia's suggestions, but she could not shake the feeling that he was studying them, filing away information about their lives for some purpose she could not yet identify. We should probably get going, Whitney said, checking her phone. Sophia has homework to do. Of course, Matthew said, signaling for the check. Thank you both for a lovely afternoon. Thank you for lunch, Sophia said politely. Can we do it again sometime? Whitney tensed, but Matthew's response was carefully neutral. I hope so, but that will be up to your mother. The server brought the check, and Matthew paid without looking at the total, leaving what Whitney suspected was a very generous tip. The casual way he handled money was a stark reminder of the gulf between their worlds. As they prepared to leave, Matthew stood and held out his hand to Sophia. It was wonderful spending time with you today, Sophia. Thank you for the pictures. Sophia shook his hand solemnly, then surprised him by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around his waist in a quick hug. I hope you are not sad anymore, Mr. Turner, she said. Matthew looked stunned for a moment, then gently patted her back. I am definitely less sad than I was yesterday. He turned to Whitney, extending his hand to her as well. When she took it, he held it for just a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, Whitney, for lunch, for your daughter's kindness, and for giving me a chance. Thank you for the meal, Whitney replied formally. As they walked toward the subway station, Sophia chatted about the lunch and how nice Mr. Turner was, and how she hoped they could have lunch again soon. Whitney listened with half her attention, the other half replaying the conversation she had had with Matthew. She believed what she had told him about men wanting something in return for their attention. Her experience with Sophia's father had taught her that lesson in painful detail. But there had been something in Matthew's eyes when he spoke to her. Something that seemed genuine rather than calculated. Maybe she was being too cynical. Maybe Rosa's warnings had made her overly suspicious. Or maybe she was exactly as naive as she had been 5 years ago when she believed that a man's sweet words reflected his true intentions. Mama, Sophia said as they descended into the subway station. Yes, baby. I think Mr. Turner is lonely. What makes you say that? The way he looked at us when we were leaving, like he wished he could come home with us. Whitney glanced back toward the cafe, but Matthew was no longer visible. What would you think about that, if he wanted to spend more time with us? Sophia considered the question with her usual seriousness. I think everyone needs friends, and I think he would be a good friend if someone gave him the chance. Even though he is very different from us. Different is not bad, Mama. Different just means he knows things we do not know, and we know things he does not know. We could teach each other. Out of the mouths of babes, Whitney thought. Her 7-year-old daughter had a wisdom about human nature that she herself seemed to have lost somewhere along the way. As the subway train carried them back to Brooklyn, Whitney found herself thinking about the way Matthew had looked at Sophia's drawing. The genuine emotion in his voice when he thanked her for it. She thought about his careful questions, his obvious effort to make Sophia feel comfortable, his respectful response when Whitney set boundaries. Maybe she was wrong about his motives. Maybe he really was just a lonely man who had been touched by a child's kindness and wanted to explore the possibility of friendship. Or maybe he was exactly what she feared he was, and she was already in the process of making the same mistake she had made once before. The train pulled into their station, and Whitney took Sophia's hand as they climbed the stairs back to street level. Their neighborhood looked even more worn and shabby after an afternoon in Manhattan, but it was home, and it was safe, and it was theirs. "Mama," Sophia said as they walked toward their apartment building. "Yes? Do you think Mr. Turner will really try to grow herbs on his windowsill?" "I do not know, sweetheart." "Why?" "Because I want to draw him a picture of what his windowsill garden could look like. You know, to give him ideas." Whitney smiled despite her lingering concerns. "That sounds like a lovely idea, baby." As they climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, Whitney made a mental note to keep Sophia's artistic impulses in check. The last thing she needed was for her daughter to develop too strong an attachment to a man who might disappear from their lives as suddenly as he had entered them. But even as she thought it, Whitney could not quite convince herself that Matthew Turner was the type of man who would disappear. There had been something solid about him, something substantial beneath the expensive clothes and polished manner. Rosa always said that a mother's first instinct was usually right. The problem was, Whitney could not tell whether her first instinct was to trust Matthew or to run from him as fast as possible. Maybe, she thought as she unlocked their apartment door, she would have to wait and see which instinct proved stronger. Matthew stared at the phone in his hand for the 3rd time that morning, Sophia's latest drawing propped against his computer monitor. She had delivered it through Whitney 2 days ago, a detailed crayon illustration of a windowsill garden, complete with labeled pots and tiny green herbs. In the corner, she had written, "For Mr. Turner's Herbs" in careful block letters. He had already ordered the pots, the soil, and every herb she had suggested. They were sitting in his apartment, still in their delivery boxes, because he had realized he did not actually know how to plant anything. More than that, he wanted Sophia to help him, wanted to see her face light up when she saw that he had taken her suggestion seriously. But asking meant calling Whitney, and he had not spoken to her since their lunch 3 days ago. The lunch that had ended with her making it crystal clear that she did not trust his motives. Matthew set the phone down and rubbed his temples. James had been right when he said Matthew was overthinking this, but he could not seem to stop. Every interaction with Whitney felt like a chess game where he did not know the rules and she held all the important pieces. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his brooding. "Come in," he called. Margaret Phillips, his assistant, poked her head through the doorway. "Mr. Turner, you have a visitor. She says she works in the building." Matthew frowned. "A business meeting I forgot about." "No, sir. She says her name is Whitney Bennett, and she needs to speak with you about her daughter." Matthew's stomach dropped. Whitney was here in the middle of a workday, looking formal enough that Margaret had treated her like a business appointment. This could not be good news. "Send her in, please." Whitney entered his office a moment later, and Matthew could tell immediately that something was wrong. Her usual composure was strained, her green eyes bright with what looked like barely controlled worry. "Whitney, what happened? Is Sophia all right?" "She is fine," Whitney said quickly. "Physically, anyway, but I need to talk to you about something, and I did not want to wait until tonight when I could catch you after work." "Sit down, please." Matthew gestured to the chairs in front of his desk, but Whitney remained standing. "This will not take long," she said. "I came to ask you to stop encouraging Sophia's attachment to you." Matthew felt as if she had slapped him. "What?" "She has been talking about you constantly since our lunch. She asks every day if we're going to see you again, if you have planted your herbs yet, if you would like to come to dinner at our apartment. She has drawn you 6 more pictures in 3 days. I do not understand why that is a problem." Whitney's composure cracked slightly. "The problem is that she is getting attached to you, and when you lose interest and move on to whatever comes next in your life, she is going to be heartbroken." "What makes you think I am going to lose interest?" "Because that is what people do," Whitney said flatly, "especially people who have never had to worry about the consequences of their actions on others." Matthew stood up slowly, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. "You think I would hurt Sophia intentionally? I think you would hurt her without meaning to, which amounts to the same thing from her perspective. What would I have to do to convince you that I care about her, that I care about both of you?" Whitney laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to know what you could do? You could disappear. You could let us go back to our lives and pretend this never happened. Is that really what you want?" The question hung in the air between them, and Matthew saw something flicker across Whitney's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or regret. "It does not matter what I want," she said finally. "It matters what is best for Sophia. And you think what is best for her is to lose a friend who cares about her. I think what is best for her is to not get her hopes up about things that are not going to last." Matthew walked around his desk until he was standing directly in front of Whitney. She took a small step backward, but he did not pursue, just stood there looking at her with all the intensity he usually reserved for hostile negotiations. "Let me ask you something, Whitney. What exactly do you think my end game is here? What do you imagine I am trying to accomplish by spending time with you and your daughter?" "I do not know," Whitney admitted. "That is the problem. The problem is that you have decided I must have ulterior motives because you cannot believe that someone might simply enjoy your company. Can you blame me for being suspicious? You are a billionaire CEO who could have lunch with anyone in the world, and you choose to eat sandwiches in the park with a cleaning lady and her 7-year-old daughter. That does not happen without a reason." "It does happen," Matthew said quietly. "It happened because your daughter saw something in me that no one else has seen in years. It happened because she reminded me that I used to be capable of caring about things other than profit margins and market shares. It happened because spending 2 hours with both of you made me feel more human than I have felt in decades." Whitney stared at him, and Matthew could see her internal struggle playing out in her expressions. The desire to believe him warred with years of hard-learned caution. "Even if that is true," she said slowly, "it does not change the fundamental problem, which is, you live in one world and we live in another. Eventually, that is going to matter." "Why does it have to matter?" "Because it always matters," Whitney said with tired certainty. "Because when you get bored with slumming it with the working class, you will go back to your real life, and we will still be here cleaning your offices and trying to pay our rent." Matthew felt anger rise in his chest, hot and unexpected. "Is that really what you think this is to me? Slumming it? What would you call it?" "I would call it the first time in my adult life that I have met people who see me as something other than a bank account or a business opportunity." "That is not true." "It is absolutely true. Do you know how many people have asked me for money since I met you? 0. Do you know how many people have tried to get me to invest in their business ideas or introduce them to my wealthy friends? 0. Do you know how many people have offered me genuine kindness without expecting anything in return? 2. You and Sophia. Whitney's resolve seemed to waver. That does not mean... It does not mean what? That I am not allowed to value that I am not allowed to want more of it in my life. It means that you do not understand what you are asking of us. Then explain it to me. Whitney closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, Matthew saw exhaustion there and something that looked like old pain. You are asking us to trust you, she said. You are asking us to let you into our lives, to let Sophia care about you, to risk everything we have built together on the chance that you mean what you say. And what is wrong with that? What is wrong with that is what happens when you change your mind, when you realize that being friends with people like us is more complicated than you thought, when your real friends start making comments about your charity cases, when you meet someone more appropriate and decide you do not have time for us anymore. Those things are not going to happen. You do not know that. You cannot promise that. Matthew was quiet for a long moment, studying Whitney's face. There was something she was not telling him, some specific experience that had taught her to expect abandonment. Someone hurt you, he said finally. Someone made you promises they did not keep. Whitney's composure finally broke completely. This is not about me. It is absolutely about you. What happened, Whitney? What did someone do to make you so afraid of trusting anyone? It does not matter. It matters to me. Whitney turned away from him, walking to the window that looked out over the city. Sophia's father, she said after a long pause. He made a lot of promises, too. Matthew waited, sensing that she needed space to tell the story in her own way. He was charming and successful, and completely convinced that he loved me. Whitney continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He was going to leave his wife, going to start a new life with me and our baby. He had it all planned out. Matthew's stomach twisted. He was married. I did not know. Not at first. Whitney's laugh was bitter. I was 28 years old and thought I was so smart, so sophisticated, but I was just naive enough to believe that someone like him could really love someone like me. What happened? What always happens? When I told him I was pregnant, he suddenly remembered that he had responsibilities, that leaving his wife would be too complicated, that maybe we should take a break until he could figure things out. Whitney's voice grew stronger, anger replacing hurt. The break has lasted 7 years so far. He has never seen Sophia. He sends a check every month, very generous, considering his lawyer made it clear that as long as I do not cause problems, the checks will keep coming. If I try to contact him or his family, they stop. Matthew felt fury building in his chest, white hot and consuming. What is his name? Why? Because I want to find him and make him understand what he has lost by walking away from his daughter. Whitney turned back to face him, and there were tears in her eyes now. Do not you see? That is exactly what I am afraid of. You are angry now, you want to fix things, you want to be the hero who swoops in and makes everything better. But what happens when you realize that some things cannot be fixed? What happens when you get tired of dealing with other people's problems? I would never get tired of caring about you and Sophia. You say that now. I mean it now, and I will mean it tomorrow, and I will mean it next year. You cannot know that. Matthew walked over to where Whitney stood by the window. He did not touch her, but he was close enough that she had to look up at him. You are right, he said. I cannot know with absolute certainty what I will feel next year or in 5 years, but I can tell you what I know right now. I know that thinking about Sophia's smile gets me through difficult days. I know that talking to you challenges me in ways that make me want to be better. I know that the prospect of losing both of you scares me more than any business deal I have ever negotiated. Whitney searched his face as if looking for signs of deception. You really mean that? I really mean that. But you do not understand what you would be getting into. We are not just two people you can add to your life when it is convenient. Sophia needs stability, consistency, people she can count on. I need to know that anyone in her life is going to stay in her life. Then let me stay. It is not that simple. Why not? Whitney gestured around his office, taking in the expensive furniture, the view of Manhattan, the trappings of wealth and power. Because this is your world, Matthew. This is where you belong. Not in a 3-room apartment in Brooklyn, eating mac and cheese from a box and helping with second-grade homework. What if I want both worlds? Then you are going to have to figure out how to bridge them, because I cannot fit into this one. Matthew looked around his office, seeing it suddenly through Whitney's eyes. Cold, intimidating, designed to keep people at a distance. Everything about it reinforced the barriers between him and the rest of the world. What if I do not want this world anymore? He asked quietly. Whitney's eyebrows rose. What do you mean? I mean, what if I have spent the last 20 years building something that looks impressive from the outside, but feels empty from the inside? What if meeting you and Sophia has made me realize that I have been chasing the wrong things? You cannot just throw away everything you have built. I am not talking about throwing it away. I am talking about changing it. Using it differently, making it serve something more important than just profit. Whitney stared at him. You are talking about changing your entire life. Maybe I am. Would that be so terrible? It would be impossible. People change careers all the time. Not people like you. You have responsibilities, employees, people who depend on you. And maybe I can serve those responsibilities in a way that also allows me to have a life outside this office. Whitney shook her head. You are being unrealistic. Am I? Or am I being honest about what I want for the first time in my adult life? Before Whitney could answer, Matthew's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was Margaret. Mr. Turner. His assistant's voice came through the speaker. I am sorry to interrupt, but you have Elena Westbrook here to see you. She says it is urgent. Matthew's blood ran cold. Elena was the last person he wanted to see right now, especially with Whitney in his office. Tell her I'm in a meeting and cannot be disturbed, he said. She says she will wait. Matthew looked at Whitney, who was watching the exchange with growing concern. Who is Elena Westbrook? Whitney asked. My ex-fiancée, Matthew said reluctantly. And she is here, why? I have no idea. We have not spoken in months. Whitney's expression hardened. I should go. Whitney, wait. But before he could stop her, the office door opened and Elena Westbrook walked in without invitation. She was exactly as Matthew remembered. Tall, elegant, perfectly put together in a way that looked effortless, but cost a fortune to maintain. Matthew, darling, Elena said, her gaze sweeping over Whitney with barely concealed disdain. I hope I am not interrupting anything important. Whitney's face flushed, and Matthew could see her withdrawing into herself, becoming smaller in Elena's presence. Elena, I thought Margaret told you I was in a meeting. Oh, this? Elena waved dismissively in Whitney's direction. I am sure whatever building maintenance issue you are discussing can wait. I have something much more important to talk to you about. The casual cruelty of Elena's assumption hit Matthew like a physical blow. She had looked at Whitney and immediately categorized her as service staff, someone whose concerns were automatically less important than her own. Actually, Matthew said, his voice dangerously quiet, Whitney and I were having a personal conversation, and I would appreciate it if you would make an appointment like everyone else. Elena's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. Personal? Matthew, really? I know you have always been kind to the help, but do not you think this is taking charity a bit far? Whitney flinched as if she'd been struck, and Matthew felt rage explode through his system like a detonation. Get out, he said to Elena, his voice low and controlled in a way that had made grown men back down in boardrooms. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out, now." Elena's composure slipped for the first time since Matthew had known her. "Matthew, what has gotten into you? You just insulted someone I care about in my own office. You walked in here without permission and made assumptions about people you know nothing about. You demonstrated exactly the kind of entitled arrogance that made me realize I could never spend my life with you." "You cannot be serious about this woman," Elena said, her voice rising. "Look at her, Matthew. Look at where she comes from. She is obviously only interested in your money. The only person in this room who has ever been interested in my money is you," Matthew said flatly. "Whitney has never asked me for anything. She has never tried to impress me or manipulate me or use me for her own gain. She has treated me like a human being instead of a bank account, which is apparently more than you are capable of." Eleanor's face went white, then red. "You are making a fool of yourself." "I am making a choice, and my choice is to ask you to leave immediately and never come back." Elena looked between Matthew and Whitney, clearly calculating whether she could salvage the situation. Finally, she seemed to realize that she could not. "This is not over, Matthew," she said as she headed for the door. "When you come to your senses, I will be waiting." The door closed behind her with a sharp click, leaving Matthew and Whitney alone in a silence that felt heavy with unspoken implications. "I should go," Whitney said quietly. "Whitney, please, do not let her ruin this." "She did not ruin anything. She just reminded me of something I had temporarily forgotten." "What?" Whitney looked at him with sad, tired eyes. "That this is your world, Matthew, and people like her are the people you are supposed to end up with. I do not want people like her. I want you." The words hung in the air between them, more revealing than Matthew had intended. Whitney's eyes widened, and he could see her processing the implications. "That is not what you said before," she said slowly. "Before, I was trying to be careful. I was trying not to push too hard or move too fast, but Eleanor just made me realize that being careful is not going to convince you of anything. Matthew, I want you, Whitney. I want Sophia. I want to come home to people who are happy to see me. I want to help with homework and plant herbs and listen to stories about 7-year-old logic. I want to build something real with people who matter to me." Whitney's composure finally broke completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. "You do not know what you are asking," she whispered. "Then tell me. You are asking me to believe that this is not just a phase for you. You are asking me to trust that you will not wake up 6 months from now and realize that you miss your old life. You are asking me to risk my daughter's heart on the chance that you mean what you say. I'm asking you to take a chance on something that could be extraordinary. And what if it is not? What if it is just ordinary? What if we are not enough to keep you interested when the novelty wears off?" Matthew reached out and gently touched her face, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "Whitney, look at me." She met his eyes, and he saw all her fear and hope and longing reflected there. "You and Sophia have already given me more joy in 2 weeks than I have felt in 20 years. If that is ordinary, then ordinary is exactly what I have been missing my entire life." Whitney closed her eyes and leaned into his touch for just a moment before pulling away. "I need time to think," she said. "How much time?" "I do not know. Maybe a lot of time." Matthew nodded, though every instinct told him to push harder, to make his case more forcefully. But he could see that Whitney was at her breaking point, and he did not want to be the thing that pushed her over the edge. "Take all the time you need," he said. "But Whitney..." "Yes? While you are thinking, remember that Sophia drew me standing outside the building, holding hands with both of you. She sees something that you are afraid to see. Maybe you should trust her instincts." Whitney looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked toward the door. "Whitney!" Matthew called after her. She paused but did not turn around. "I planted the herbs," he said, "all of them. They are sitting on my windowsill right now, and I have no idea if I am taking care of them correctly." Sophia would probably have a lot of advice about that. Whitney's shoulders sagged slightly, and Matthew could see the war between hope and fear playing out in the line of her body. "Goodbye, Matthew," she said softly, and then she was gone. Matthew stood alone in his office, surrounded by all the trappings of success that suddenly felt meaningless. Outside his window, the city continued its relentless motion, millions of people pursuing their own versions of happiness. He thought about Whitney's tears, about the way she had leaned into his touch before pulling away. He thought about Sophia's drawings and her innocent belief that everyone deserved kindness. He thought about Elena's casual cruelty and the way it had illuminated everything that was wrong with his old life. For the first time in his career, Matthew Turner had no idea how to solve the problem in front of him. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he was not going to give up. Whitney and Sophia had become too important to him, had shown him too much about who he could be. He was going to find a way to bridge their worlds, even if it meant tearing down his own world and rebuilding it from scratch. 3 weeks had passed since Whitney's confrontation in Matthew's office, and the silence between them felt like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. He had kept his word about giving her time to think, but every day that passed without contact felt like a small death. Matthew stood in his apartment at 6 in the morning, staring at the windowsill garden that had become both his hope and his torment. The herbs were thriving under his inexpert care, growing green and fragrant in their ceramic pots. He had researched everything about their care, watched countless videos, read gardening websites until his eyes burned. But every time he looked at them, he saw Sophia's excited face and heard her voice explaining which ones were good for cooking. His phone buzzed with a text from James. "Board meeting in an hour. You ready for this?" Matthew picked up his phone and typed back, "As ready as I can be." Today was the day he was going to present his proposal to the Turner Associates Board of Directors. The proposal that would change everything about how he ran his company, how he lived his life, and how he defined success. He had spent the last 3 weeks working 18-hour days, not because he was avoiding his feelings, but because he was channeling them into something productive. If Whitney thought he could not bridge their worlds, he was going to prove her wrong in the most concrete way possible. An hour later, Matthew sat at the head of the polished conference table, looking at the faces of the 12 people who controlled the future of his company. These were some of the most powerful business leaders in New York, and he was about to ask them to approve something that would sound completely insane to most of them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Matthew began, "I want to talk to you today about a fundamental shift in how Turner Associates operates and what we prioritize as a company." He clicked to his first slide, which showed the company's financial performance over the past 5 years. The numbers were impressive by any measure. We have been extraordinarily successful by traditional metrics. Our profits have grown consistently, our client base has expanded, and our reputation in the industry is unmatched. But I believe we have the opportunity to be more than just successful. I believe we have the opportunity to be meaningful. Several board members exchanged glances. Matthew could see skepticism in their expressions, but also curiosity. "What I am proposing is the creation of the Turner Foundation, a non-profit arm of our company that will provide business consulting services to low-income entrepreneurs, single parents starting small businesses, and community organizations that need professional guidance but cannot afford our usual rates." Board member Patricia Chen leaned forward. "Matthew, that sounds like charity, not business." "It is both," Matthew replied. "The foundation will be funded by setting aside 15% of our annual profits. But more than that, every employee will be encouraged to spend 20% of their work time on foundation projects. We will treat these pro bono cases with the same seriousness and expertise that we bring to our paying clients. What is the return on investment? Asked Robert Steinberg, the company's CFO. The return is not financial, at least not in the traditional sense. The return is in employee satisfaction, community impact, and long-term sustainability. Companies that prioritize social responsibility consistently outperform their competitors in employee retention, brand loyalty, and public perception. Matthew clicked to his next slide, which showed research data supporting his claims. Beyond that, he continued, I believe that working with diverse communities will make us better consultants for all our clients. When you expand your perspective, you expand your ability to solve problems creatively. James Morrison, who had been quietly supportive throughout Matthew's planning process, spoke up. What kind of oversight would the foundation have? How would we measure success? Excellent question. I propose that we measure success through multiple metrics: number of businesses helped, jobs created in underserved communities, percentage of foundation clients who achieve their stated goals, and feedback from both our volunteers and the communities we serve. For the next hour, Matthew fielded questions, addressed concerns, and presented financial projections. He could see the board members warming to the idea, though some remained skeptical. Finally, Patricia Chen asked the question Matthew had been waiting for. This is a significant departure from how we have always operated, Matthew. What inspired this change? Matthew was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer honestly without revealing too much about his personal motivations. I have been thinking a lot lately about legacy, he said finally, about what I want this company to stand for and what I want my life to mean. We have built something incredibly successful, but I want to build something that matters. I want us to be remembered not just for the deals we closed or the profits we generated, but for the lives we changed and the communities we strengthened. That is very noble, said board member Dr. Elizabeth Warren, but noble does not always translate to sustainable. What happens if this foundation starts losing money? What happens if it becomes a distraction from our core business? Then we evaluate and adjust, just like we do with any other business initiative. But I do not think that will happen. I think this will energize our team and attract the kind of clients who want to work with a company that shares their values. The discussion continued for another 30 minutes before Matthew called for a vote. The proposal passed by a narrow margin. 7 votes in favor, 5 opposed. It was not the overwhelming endorsement he had hoped for, but it was enough. As the board members filed out of the conference room, James stayed behind. That was impressive, he said. Also completely insane, but impressive. Do you think it will work? I think it will work, if you can find the right person to run it. This foundation is going to need someone who understands both business and community work, someone who can navigate between our world and the communities we want to serve. Matthew smiled for the first time in weeks. I might have someone in mind. Yeah? Who? Someone who has been managing a household budget on a single income while raising a child and working full-time. Someone who understands what it means to stretch every dollar and still find ways to help others. Someone who has been underestimated her entire life, but has more practical wisdom than most people with MBA degrees. James stared at him. You are talking about Whitney. I am talking about Whitney. Matt, you cannot offer someone a job just because you want to date them. That is called sexual harassment. I am not offering her a job because I want to date her. I am offering her a job because she is exactly what this foundation needs, and the foundation is exactly what she deserves. Does she have any business experience? She has been running a household like a small business for 7 years. She budgets, she plans, she problem solves, she manages resources. Plus, she understands the communities we want to serve because she lives in them. She knows what real people need because she is a real person. James looked skeptical. And you think she will say yes? I think she will say yes to the job. Whether she says yes to anything else remains to be seen. This is either the most romantic gesture in history or the most epic disaster waiting to happen. Probably both, Matthew admitted. That afternoon, Matthew stood outside Whitney's apartment building in Brooklyn, holding a folder that contained a job offer that could change her life. He had debated calling first, but he was afraid that if he gave her the opportunity to refuse to see him, she would take it. The building was exactly what he had expected based on Sophia's descriptions. Old, but well-maintained, with a small garden in front that showed signs of loving care. He found Whitney's name on the directory and buzzed her apartment. Yes. Whitney's voice came through the intercom, cautious. Whitney, it is Matthew. I have something I need to show you. A long pause. Matthew, I thought we agreed. We agreed that you needed time to think. I'm not here to pressure you about anything personal. I'm here to offer you a job. Another pause. Longer this time. A job. A job. Can I come up, please? 5 minutes, I promise. The buzzer sounded, and Matthew climbed 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. When Whitney opened the door, he could see Sophia behind her, peeking around her mother's legs with curious eyes. Mr. Turner, Sophia exclaimed, breaking free from Whitney's grip and launching herself at Matthew for a hug. Hello, Sophia, Matthew said, crouching down to her level. I have been taking very good care of those herbs you helped me choose. Are they growing? They are growing beautifully. I think you were right about the basil being good for cooking. I told you, Sophia said triumphantly. Mama, can Mr. Turner come in? I want to show him the picture I drew of his herb garden. Whitney looked torn between maternal protectiveness and basic politeness. Sophia, Mr. Turner said he could only stay for 5 minutes. That's enough time to see a picture, Sophia said with 7-year-old logic. Matthew looked at Whitney pleadingly. 5 minutes. I promise. Whitney stepped aside reluctantly, and Matthew entered the small apartment. It was exactly as he had imagined. Clean, modest, filled with signs of the love between mother and daughter. Sophia's artwork covered the refrigerator. Books were stacked on every available surface, and the scent of something that smelled like vanilla and home filled the air. Sit down, Whitney said, gesturing to a small couch. Would you like some coffee? That would be wonderful. Thank you. As Whitney busied herself in the kitchen, Sophia showed Matthew her latest drawings. She had indeed created a detailed illustration of his windowsill garden, complete with labels for each herb and tiny bees buzzing around the plants. This is incredible, Sophia, Matthew said. You remembered every single herb we talked about. I have a good memory for important things, Sophia said seriously. Mama says that is a useful skill. Whitney returned with coffee in a mug that had seen better days but was scrupulously clean. She sat down across from Matthew, her posture guarded. You said something about a job. Matthew opened the folder he had brought and pulled out a professional-looking document. I want to offer you the position of Director of Community Outreach for the Turner Foundation. Whitney frowned. What is the Turner Foundation? As of this morning, it is a non-profit arm of Turner Associates that provides business consulting services to low-income entrepreneurs and community organizations. Matthew handed her the job description. The foundation will be funded by 15% of our annual profits, and we are looking for someone to run it who understands both business principles and community needs. Whitney stared at the document in her hands. This is a real job offer. It is a real job offer. Salary is $65,000 a year to start, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. You would have your own office, your own budget, and complete authority over which projects the foundation takes on. Matthew, I do not have a college degree. I do not have business experience. I clean offices for a living. You have 7 years of experience managing resources under pressure. You have demonstrated leadership skills and community connections. You have shown more practical wisdom in 2 weeks than most of my employees show in 2 years. Whitney set the job description on the coffee table and looked at him with suspicious eyes. This is not real. It is completely real. You are offering me a job that I am not qualified for because you want to... What? Rescue me? Make yourself feel better about having money while I struggle to pay rent? Matthew felt a familiar frustration rise in his chest. I am offering you a job because you are exactly what this foundation needs. Your background is not a liability, Whitney. It is an asset. How is cleaning offices an asset for running a foundation? Because you understand what it means to work hard for everything you have. Because you know how to stretch a budget and make difficult choices. Because you have credibility with the communities we want to serve. Because you are smart and capable and have been underestimated your entire life. Whitney shook her head. This is charity. This is opportunity. I do not want your pity. Good, because I am not offering pity. I am offering respect and a chance to use your skills in a way that could help thousands of people. Sophia, who had been listening to this exchange with growing concern, spoke up. Mama, what is wrong? Mr. Turner is trying to give you a good job. It is complicated, baby, Whitney said gently. Why is it complicated? Whitney looked at Matthew, then back at her daughter. Because sometimes people offer things that seem too good to be true, and we have to be careful about why they are offering them. But Mr. Turner is nice, Sophia said with certainty. Nice people do not trick other people. Some nice people do things for the wrong reasons, even when they mean well. Matthew leaned forward. Whitney, what would I have to do to convince you that this offer is legitimate? That it has nothing to do with charity and everything to do with the fact that you are the right person for this job? You could offer it to someone else, Whitney said flatly. I do not want to offer it to someone else. I want to offer it to you. Why? Because when I was developing this foundation, I kept thinking about what you said to me that day in my office. You said that I did not understand what it was like to worry about paying rent, or stretching grocery money, or making sure your child has everything she needs. You were right. I do not understand those things. Matthew paused, choosing his words carefully. But I realized that instead of seeing that as a barrier, I should see it as exactly why I need someone like you. This foundation is supposed to help people who are facing the challenges you face every day. Who better to run it than someone who understands those challenges intimately? Whitney was quiet for a long time, staring at the job description. Matthew could see her reading through the details, processing the implications. $65,000 a year, she said finally. To start, with performance reviews every 6 months and opportunities for raises, full benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, retirement plan, and 3 weeks paid vacation. My own office, your own assistant, and a budget that you control completely. Whitney looked up at him. This would change everything for us. That is the idea. Sophia could have things she has never had. We could move to a better apartment, maybe even save for her college education. Yes. And all I would have to do is help other people who are in situations like mine. That is all you would have to do. Whitney set the job description down and looked directly at Matthew. What is the catch? There is no catch. There is always a catch. Matthew sighed. The catch is that you would be working for me. The catch is that I care about you and Sophia, and taking this job would mean seeing me regularly. The catch is that I cannot promise I will not continue hoping that someday you will trust me enough to let me be part of your lives in a more personal way. So this is about your feelings for me. This job offer is about your qualifications and what this foundation needs. My feelings for you are separate from that, but I am not going to pretend they do not exist. Whitney stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. If I took this job and things went badly between us personally, what would happen? Nothing would happen to your job. You would have a contract that protects you from exactly that scenario. You could fire me. I could not fire you without cause, and personal reasons would not constitute cause. Besides, once the foundation is established, it will have its own board of directors. I would not have unilateral authority over your employment. Whitney turned back to face him. You have really thought this through. I have thought about everything, Whitney. I have thought about what you need, what Sophia needs, what the foundation needs, and what I need. This job solves multiple problems at once, and if I said no, if you said no, I would find someone else to run the foundation, and I would respect your decision. You would not try to change my mind. Not about the job. I might continue hoping that you would give me a chance personally, but I would not make that contingent on your employment. Sophia, who had been quietly coloring during this conversation, looked up at her mother. Mama, do you want the job? Whitney smiled at her daughter. What do you think, baby? Should Mama take a job helping other people? Yes, Sophia said without hesitation. You like helping people, and people need help. Plus, Mr. Turner said you would be good at it. He did say that. And you would have your own office, like Mr. Turner. That sounds important. Whitney laughed, and Matthew felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. It does sound important, does not it? Very important, Sophia agreed. Plus, if you worked with Mr. Turner, I could visit you at work sometimes and see his herb garden. That is true, Whitney said, glancing at Matthew. Would occasional visits from a 7-year-old be acceptable in this new job? Occasional visits from a 7-year-old would be encouraged, Matthew said solemnly. Whitney picked up the job description again, reading through it one more time. When she looked up, her expression was different, still cautious, but with a spark of excitement that had not been there before. When would I start? Matthew's heart jumped. Does that mean you are accepting? That means I am considering accepting. When would I start? 2 weeks from Monday, if you want time to give notice at your current job? And the salary would really be $65,000. Really $65,000. Whitney closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them, she was smiling. I accept, she said. Sophia let out a cheer and ran to hug her mother. Mama has an important job. Mama has an important job, Whitney agreed, tears in her eyes. Matthew stood up, extending his hand to Whitney. Welcome to the Turner Foundation, Director Bennett. Whitney shook his hand, and this time she did not pull away immediately. Thank you, Matthew, for the opportunity and for believing I could do this. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes. As Matthew prepared to leave, Sophia tugged on his sleeve. Mr. Turner, since Mama is going to work with you, does that mean we can be friends again? Matthew looked at Whitney, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I would like that very much, Sophia. Good, Sophia said with satisfaction. I have been saving up drawings to show you. As Matthew walked back to the subway station, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. The job offer had been accepted, which meant the foundation would have the leadership it needed. But more than that, Whitney had accepted his professional respect for her abilities, which felt like the first step towards something more. He thought about the way she had smiled when she accepted the job, the excitement in her eyes when she talked about what the salary would mean for Sophia's future. He thought about Sophia's matter-of-fact assumption that they could be friends again now that the professional relationship was established. For the first time since Elena's intrusion into his office, Matthew felt hopeful. Whitney was not ready to trust him with her heart, but she was ready to trust him with her career. It was a beginning. And sometimes, Matthew reflected as the subway carried him back to Manhattan, a beginning was all you needed to build something extraordinary. 6 months later, Matthew stood in the doorway of what had once been a sterile conference room and was now the vibrant heart of the Turner Foundation. Whitney sat at the head of a long table, leading a meeting with 3 small business owners who had come seeking guidance for their startups. The key is not to think of your budget as a constraint, Whitney was saying, but as a roadmap. Every dollar you spend should move you closer to your goals. Matthew watched as she pulled out a simple chart she had created, showing how to prioritize expenses when money was tight. The 3 entrepreneurs, a woman who wanted to start a catering business, a man hoping to open a neighborhood repair shop, and a young couple with dreams of a food truck, listened with the intensity of people who knew this advice could change their lives. "Mrs. Bennett," said the woman with the catering dreams, "how do I know if I am spending too much on equipment versus marketing?" Whitney smiled. "Let me tell you what I learned when I was trying to decide whether to spend our grocery money on school supplies or Sophia's winter coat." As Whitney launched into a story that somehow connected household budgeting to business planning, Matthew felt the familiar warmth in his chest that came from watching her in her element. In 6 months, she had transformed the foundation from his abstract idea into a thriving organization that had already helped 47 small businesses get off the ground. More than that, she had transformed him. "Mr. Turner." Matthew turned to see Rosa Martinez approaching with a clipboard and a knowing smile. Whitney had hired Rosa as the foundation's administrative coordinator, and the older woman had thrown herself into the work with enthusiasm that rivaled her protectiveness of Whitney. "The community center called," Rosa said. "They want to know if we can send someone to their small business workshop next week." "I think Whitney would be perfect for that," Matthew said. "I think Whitney would be perfect for a lot of things," Rosa said meaningfully. "The question is, when are you going to tell her that?" Matthew felt heat rise in his face. "Rosa, Mijo, I have been watching you watch her for 6 months. I have also been watching her watch you when she thinks no one is looking. How long are you two going to keep pretending that this is just about work?" "It is complicated. Love is always complicated. That does not mean it is not worth pursuing." Before Matthew could respond, the meeting ended and the 3 entrepreneurs headed toward the elevator, chatting excitedly about their next steps. Whitney gathered her papers and walked over to where Matthew and Rosa were standing. "How did it go?" Matthew asked. "Really well. Carmen's catering business could be operational within 3 months if she follows our plan. And David has a solid concept for the repair shop. He just needed help thinking through the financial projections. And the couple with the food truck idea." Whitney's smile dimmed slightly. "They have great recipes and wonderful enthusiasm, but they are underestimating startup costs by about $15,000. I'm going to work with them on a revised timeline." Matthew nodded, struck as always by Whitney's combination of optimism and realism. She never crushed anyone's dreams, but she also never let them pursue those dreams blindly. "I have something I wanted to discuss with you," Matthew said. "Do you have a few minutes?" "Of course." They walked to Whitney's office, which she had decorated with Sophia's artwork and photos of foundation success stories. The space felt warm and lived in, nothing like the cold formality of Matthew's executive suite upstairs. "I had lunch with Patricia Chen from the board today," Matthew said, settling into the chair across from Whitney's desk. Whitney looked up with interest. How did that go? Is she still skeptical about the foundation? Actually, she wanted to tell me that she has been bragging about our work to other companies. 3 of them are interested in starting similar programs, and they want to hire us as consultants to help them set up their own foundations. Whitney's eyes widened. Really? That's incredible. It gets better. She also said that our employee satisfaction scores have gone through the roof since we started the foundation. Turnover is down, productivity is up, and we're attracting better job candidates because people want to work for a company that cares about social impact. So you were right about the business benefits. We were right, Matthew corrected. This only works because you made it work. You took my abstract idea and turned it into something real and sustainable. Whitney flushed with pleasure. I had a lot of help. You had a lot of support, but the vision and the execution were all you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Matthew found himself studying Whitney's face. 6 months of meaningful work had given her a confidence that made her even more beautiful than before. She moved through the world now with the assurance of someone who knew her worth, who understood that her contributions mattered. Matthew, Whitney said softly, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. Am I happy? When I first met you, Sophia drew you as the sad boss. Are you still sad? Matthew considered the question seriously. No, he said finally. I am not sad anymore. Are you? I am not sad either. Whitney paused. I am grateful, and I am fulfilled, and I am proud of what we have built here. But I am also what? Also wondering what comes next. Matthew's heart started beating faster. What do you mean? Whitney stood up and walked to her window, which looked out over the same city view as Matthew's office, but from a different angle. I mean that 6 months ago, you offered me a job, and I was terrified that you had ulterior motives. I was convinced that you would lose interest or change your mind, or find some reason to regret giving me this opportunity. And now I realize that you gave me exactly what you promised: respect, responsibility, and a chance to make a difference. You have never made me feel like I owe you anything beyond good work, and you have never used your position to pressure me about anything personal. I told you I would not. I know, but I did not believe you could keep that promise. I thought your personal feelings would interfere with our professional relationship. Matthew joined her at the window. And have they? No, Whitney said, turning to look at him. But mine have. The admission hung in the air between them, and Matthew felt his breath catch in his throat. Whitney! I have spent 6 months trying to keep my feelings separate from work, she continued. I have told myself that gratitude is not the same as love, that professional respect is not the same as personal attraction, that I should not confuse what you have done for my career with what I might want you to do for my heart. And what conclusion have you reached? Whitney smiled, and it was the first completely unguarded expression Matthew had seen from her since that first night in the break room. I have reached the conclusion that my 7-year-old daughter is wiser than I am. She told me 6 months ago that you had kind eyes and that everyone needs friends. She also told me last week that she thinks you are lonely for family, not just company. Sophia said that. Sophia said that. And when I asked her what she thought I should do about it, she said I should stop being scared and start being brave. Matthew took a step closer to Whitney, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. And what do you think about her advice? I think she is right. I think I have been so afraid of being hurt again that I almost missed something extraordinary. Whitney, are you saying? I am saying that I love you, Matthew Turner. I love your kindness and your dedication and the way you listen to Sophia's stories like they are the most important thing in the world. I love how you have used your privilege to help others instead of just accumulating more for yourself. I love that you planted herbs because a 7-year-old girl suggested it. And I love that you still tend them every morning. Matthew felt tears prick at his eyes. You love me. I love you. And I think you love me too. I have loved you since the night you tried to protect Sophia from getting in trouble for her drawing. I have loved you since you challenged me to be better than I was. I have loved you through every moment of doubt and fear and hope. Matthew reached out and cupped Whitney's face in his hands, the same gesture he had made in his office 6 months ago. But this time, she did not pull away. Whitney Bennett, will you let me love you? Will you let me love Sophia? Will you trust me with both your hearts? Yes, Whitney whispered, yes to all of it. When Matthew kissed her, it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. It felt like the answer to every question he had ever asked about what his life was supposed to mean. It felt like the beginning of everything he had never dared to hope for. They were interrupted by the sound of someone clearing their throat in the doorway. They broke apart to see Sophia standing there with Rosa, both of them grinning widely. "Finally!" Sophia exclaimed. "I was wondering when you two were going to figure it out." "How long have you been standing there?" Whitney asked, her cheeks pink. "Long enough," Rosa said with satisfaction. "Mija, you did good." Sophia ran to Matthew and Whitney, wrapping her arms around both of them in an enthusiastic hug. "Does this mean Mr. Turner can come to dinner at our house now? I want to show him how to make my famous mac and cheese." "I would love to learn how to make famous mac and cheese," Matthew said solemnly. "And does this mean we can all live together like a real family?" Sophia continued with the directness that Matthew had come to treasure. Whitney and Matthew looked at each other over Sophia's head. "Would you like that, sweetheart?" Whitney asked. "I would like that very much," Sophia said. "I think Mr. Turner needs people to take care of him, and I think we are good at taking care of people." "We are very good at taking care of people," Whitney agreed. "Then it is settled," Sophia announced. "We are going to be a family." 1 year later, Matthew stood in the same spot where he had first discovered Sophia's drawing, but everything else had changed. His office walls were covered with her artwork now, splashes of color and joy that transformed the sterile space into something warm and alive. Whitney's coffee mug sat on his desk next to a photo of the three of them at Sophia's school play. The Turner Foundation occupied an entire floor of the building now, with 12 full-time employees and a waiting list of entrepreneurs seeking their services. Whitney had been featured in 3 business magazines as an innovator in community-based economic development, and she had been invited to speak at conferences across the country. But the greatest change was not professional. The greatest change was the way Matthew felt when he woke up every morning next to Whitney, in the apartment they had bought together in a neighborhood where Sophia could walk to school and they could all have a garden. The apartment where Sophia's herbs grew on every windowsill, where family photos covered the refrigerator, where dinner conversations filled the kitchen with laughter and love. "Mr. Turner," Sophia's voice called from the doorway of his office. "Yes, sweetheart. Mama said to tell you that dinner is ready, and also that if you work past 7 o'clock again, she is going to come up here and drag you home herself." Matthew laughed, saving his work and closing his laptop. "We cannot have that, can we? Tell Mama I am on my way." "Actually, I have a better idea," Sophia said, producing a piece of paper from behind her back. "I drew you another picture." Matthew accepted the drawing with the same reverence he had shown her very first gift. This one showed three stick figures standing in front of a house with a garden full of flowers. The man and woman were holding hands, and the little girl was holding the hand of both of them. Above the drawing, in Sophia's careful handwriting, were the words, "The Happy Family." "Do you like it?" Sophia asked. "I love it," Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love it almost as much as I love you." "I love you too, Daddy Matthew," Sophia said, using the name that still made his heart skip a beat every time he heard it. As they walked to the elevator together, Matthew thought about the man he had been a year ago, lonely, driven, successful by every external measure but empty inside. That man could never have imagined this life, could never have believed that happiness might come in the form of a hand-drawn picture and a 7-year-old's unconditional love. The elevator doors opened, and Matthew saw his reflection in the polished steel. He still looked tired sometimes, still carried the weight of responsibility that came with running a company, but there was something fundamentally different in his eyes now. Joy, perhaps. Or maybe just the quiet contentment that came from knowing he was exactly where he belonged. When they reached the lobby, Matthew could see Whitney waiting for them by the security desk, chatting with the evening guards who had become like family over the past year. She looked up as they approached, and her face lit up with the smile that never failed to make his world brighter. "There you are," she said, reaching for his hand. "I was starting to think I might have to stage an intervention. Sophia delivered your message very effectively," Matthew said, squeezing her fingers. "Something about being dragged home." "I am a woman of my word," Whitney said with mock seriousness. As they walked out into the evening air, Sophia skipping ahead of them toward the subway station, Matthew marveled at how perfectly ordinary and extraordinarily wonderful his life had become. No more 16-hour days in empty offices, no more silent dinners in expensive restaurants, no more wondering what the point of success was if there was no one to share it with. "What are you thinking about?" Whitney asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "I am thinking about the sad boss," Matthew said. "The sad boss. The man in Sophia's first drawing. I am wondering what he would think if he could see us now." Whitney smiled. "I think he would be amazed at how much one little girl's kindness can change." "I think he would be grateful," Matthew said. "I think he would be grateful that someone saw through all his walls and decided he was worth saving." "You saved yourself, Matthew. Sophia and I just reminded you who you really were underneath all that loneliness." As they descended into the subway station, joining the stream of people heading home to their own families, Matthew reflected on the truth of Whitney's words. Sophia's drawing had not changed him. It had revealed him. Whitney's love had not transformed him. It had freed him to become the man he had always been capable of being. The train arrived, and they found seats together, Sophia chattering about her day while Whitney listened with the patient attention that made her such a wonderful mother. Matthew watched them, his wife and daughter, and felt the familiar surge of gratitude that had become as much a part of his daily routine as coffee and morning meetings. 2 stops before their station, Sophia looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy Matthew, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Are you still the sad boss?" Matthew considered the question, thinking about the journey that had brought him from that empty office to this moment. "No, baby," he said finally. "I am not the sad boss anymore. Now I am the happy daddy." Sophia nodded with satisfaction, as if this was exactly the answer she had been hoping for. "Good," she said. "Happy is much better than sad." "Much better," Matthew agreed, pulling both Whitney and Sophia closer to him as the train carried them home. In the window's reflection, he could see the 3 of them together, a family created not by chance or obligation, but by choice and love, and the courage to believe that people were capable of change. It was the perfect image to end his story, he thought. Not the fairy tale ending he might have imagined once, but something better. Something real. 5 years later, the Turner Foundation had expanded to 12 cities and helped launch over 3,000 small businesses. Whitney had written a book about community-based economic development that became required reading in business schools across the country. And Sophia had just turned 12, her windowsill gardens now supplemented by a small greenhouse in their backyard where she grew vegetables for the local food bank. But the most important change was the smallest one. Every night when Matthew came home from work, he was greeted by the sound of laughter and the smell of dinner cooking, and the knowledge that he was not just successful, but loved. The sad boss had become a memory, replaced by a man who understood that the greatest achievement of his life would never appear on any balance sheet or quarterly report. It would live in the drawings that still covered his office walls, in the herb gardens that flourished on every windowsill, and in the hearts of the two people who had taught him that kindness was not a weakness, but the strongest foundation on which to build a life. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.